guys, I actually previously taught this lesson, and I'm gonna go more into detail of how I would actually improve it with including more technology, since it was half lecture with technology and the other part of it was students analyzing primary sources. But I printed out copies instead of providing online ones, since my students prefer to write on paper than to annotate a primary source using their computers, because they have access to Chromebooks and it was just easier for them. But I just kind of want to go further into what the lesson was about and what were the issues I had with not only technology but also without technology. So the theme of my lesson is actually ties into the imperialism my world studies kids were doing. So I came up with the idea like, okay, well, since they're talking about imperialism, I thought, well, I kind of want them to learn more about one of the biggest figures in imperialism. That would be Christopher Columbus, since usually when it's taught in history that Columbus was this hero-like figure, that's not really the case. He was more of a conqueror. So I thought, well, this would actually work very well with their current unit at the time about imperialism, since a lot of the journals they were reading from imperialists were very similar to Columbus's own writings. So what I did was I found a mixture of letters, a Spanish decree that Columbus read out loud, and a few diary entries, one from Christopher Columbus's son Fernando, and then one from one of his captains. And I wanted the students to really read them, pay attention, and I told them, I want you to mark instances of imperialism or certain ideas that tell you what is this superpower doing, because I purposely blacked out certain material where it would be a dead giveaway saying oh, this is Columbus. I made sure I blocked out any mentions of Spain, but I did leave some hints, for example, the King and Queen of Spain. But I wanted them to really kind of read it and then be able to pull up the similarities and be okay, I see how this is imperialism now. So then after they were done with the annotation, we would go right into discussion, which are the reason why I have these slides. So we would go and say what were the common themes we found. We would talk about things such as genocide, enslavement, a tribute system, where if the natives didn't collect enough materials such as gold, copper, silver, they would be mutilated, whether they'll have the noses chopped up, but the most common was the chopping of the hands. And that was one of the things that really spoke to me, since I thought, well, King Leopold II also authorized this in the Belgian Congo when Belgium took over. And they would do this, unfortunately, to various African tribes they ruled over, all just for rubber. So then we would go further into the slide. We talked about what elements of imperialism they found, and I wanted them to determine, well, who or what are these sources referring to, and they got those, so that wasn't the issue. The why doesn't matter, that was the problem, because I thought I did enough build up for the hints that they would get it, and that's probably my fault. So then I would go further into lectures for Age of Imperialism, and I started off with this quote that I got from Lies My Teacher Told Me by James Loewen, and I thought it was very fitting. So it says, in 1943, Columbus stole all you could see, and then we kind of went from talking there, and then I would go into a little lecture of why the explorers decide to explore. We would talk about things such as the quest for land and resources, and for kingdoms such as Spain and England to expand their territory and basically become a world power. And then I would go further into it, and I also create a little map icon for them to look at. So I wanted them to tell me, okay, well, what countries were the main focus at that point? It was just predominantly in the quote-unquote New World, which is North and South America. But then as we get to imperialism, I changed the map icon graphics for a little bit. Then in order to like kind of focus on this is what's going on in Africa, because like almost like 300 years later. So that was one thing that they really liked. And I also made them complete an exit slip at the very end of the lesson, where they could either turn it into me electronically, or they could write a piece of paper. And I'm gonna kind of leave it off there at the moment. So some things I would actually change if I were to teach this activity again, especially if I wanted to make it completely tech-friendly. I think I would have them annotate the documents either ahead of time or while they're in class, but through Google Drive. I wouldn't know how to make it an accessible PDF file, but I could try to figure that out. Also, too, like, one of our classmates, Micah, he taught us this really cool service called Nearpod, and I thought, well, I kind of would like to see more of like a technological, active, discussion, especially when going back to discussion questions, because you can actually upload these questions to Nearpod, and you can use Google Slides with it too. And one of the cool things is you can actually add little features. Certain ones are for free, where students can actually type out their responses and then they'd be posted in real time, almost like a tweet. And I thought, okay, that'd be really cool. And I think that'd be a great way for students to get involved, especially if they're not comfortable with speaking. Another one I would probably do too is I would incorporate maybe video in this, because I think even though the pictures did help, it was a little too text heavy, and maybe having videos or like a little podcast they can listen to may help, or animations work too, especially for these little maps so they can see the change over time. Nearpod does a really good job with animations, plus you could also incorporate virtual tours of certain countries, and I thought that'd be a really cool idea so they can get an idea of how the land has changed over time. Final thoughts. I would like to teach this lesson again, but I feel like certain changes need to be made to make it much more successful than it was, because it did start off great at first, but then towards the end of the lesson, it just kind of fizzled out. So I'm just going to take those experiences that I learned from and just pretty much use those as a guide for what not to do and what to do next time I teach it.